Do you ever look at your day and ask yourself, where did it go? You ever had those days? You say, is it already over? Really? I feel like I just was supposed to start and it's gone. And you feel like sometimes you accomplish nothing that day. Or maybe you work all day, you stay focused, you have your list of things to do, you're busy, you work through all your tasks, and at the end of the day you look back and you say, I don't feel like I've accomplished anything today. I feel like things are getting done, but then I don't feel that sense of satisfaction. I feel like I'm not getting anywhere with this. And sometimes we can't help it but feel that the time that we have invested into something as important as maybe our work, we feel like it's lost. And when I say these things, this doesn't necessarily have to do with your job. Yes, it doesn't have to be all about 9-to-5 grind, because maybe you are in that position where you're doing the 9-to-5 grind. Okay, I realize that. Maybe you're in the office, maybe you're running your own business, maybe you're going to school, maybe you're a student, or maybe you're just a parent taking care of kids. Guess what? Even if you're retired, you still can set certain goals and then say, where did my day go? We can all feel like that. It doesn't really matter where we are in life at that very moment. And as we hit those times and we don't see the progress, we can become discouraged. Now, in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 8, which is in our parsha this week, Moses was reminding Israel about their experience in the wilderness. Imagine that. When I ask people what do they think about the time Jewish people spend in the wilderness, I get very different answers. Sometimes, and probably most often, I get the answer that this was just 40 years happened because it was a punishment for the generation that lacked faith in Hashem. So we know that God was quite clear about that. Hashem did say that this is exactly what's going to happen. So people tend to look at the 40 days in the wilderness as the 140-year-old timeout. Okay. Timeout for Israel. Now, some answers I get often highlight the endless complaining during the 40 years. I don't know if you got this or not, but yes, it is true. Most Jews really know how to complain. Okay? If complaining was a competitive sport, our people would take most of the medals. I mean, come on. But it could not have been all that terrible, even though we do have quite a few mentions in the Torah that people complained. They weren't happy about things. So many amazing things happened in the wilderness journey. God was so close to the people. Think about it. He was literally a cloud by day and a fire by night. What would you give to have that manifestation of God in your life today, right now? So I'm sure the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness was not just your camping experience, but the prophets of Israel actually cast those days as the days of intimacy, almost as the days of honeymoon. And that is why most people who are a bit more perceptive usually give me an answer that 40 years in the wilderness were anything but lost time. As I said, sometimes we can feel like we lose time, that it just goes away and there's nothing to show for it. Well, guess what? Out of all the many things that we can say about the 40 years in the wilderness, it was definitely not time lost. So I was focusing on the parsha this week, just reading it, thinking about what does it mean for us today. Hashem gave me some really encouraging words in my heart. So I want to run over one verse in our parsha with you today and then focus on its message. Deuteronomy 8:2 is what I want you to focus on. If you are opening and looking that up or following along with me, please look at these words. So Moses says in Deuteronomy 8:2, remember the path that the Lord your God has led you in the wilderness. Sounds very simple. So God led Israel around. Well, the Hebrew says, remember the path or the way, and then it says, Asher cholicha Adonai Elohecha, the path which Hashem, your God, literally in Hebrew caused you to walk. I know you can't see this in English, okay? But the verb is in a he feel form. It's a little bit unusual. And so it's not that you just walked. It's God made you walk this path. And I know that it may be a little bit uncommon in English to think of a person being walked. Usually when we think about someone or something being walked, we're talking about something like a dog. But that's exactly what Hashem is saying. You've been walked in the wilderness all these years. That's kind of what Hebrew points out. So the best way that I would translate it is that Hashem led you. Because when you're being led, you are walking, but you're really being shown the path of where to go. Because you yourself do not quite know where you're supposed to be going. So God walked you for 40 years in the wilderness, and then the Torah adds, Le'aman anotcha linsotcha, with hardships for the sake of testing you. Think about this for a second. With hardships for the sake of testing you. This was a very long test, 40 years. And apparently hardships were a big part of it. So yes, all that complaining, all that language of complaint that happened there actually happened for a reason. Hashem meant for it to happen. So what was God testing Israel about? The verse continues. It says, Le'da'at asher bilvanecha chatishmor mitzvot imlo. To know, Le'da'at, to know or to learn what was in your hearts if you will keep the commandments or not. The whole point, all of this 40-year journey was a heart test. That's what it was about. It was a heart test. And the test was to determine whether Israel is going to keep the commandments or not. That's what it says right there in the text. Because the truth is, what God really wanted to see if Israel was going to obey in their heart. There's a big difference about obeying and obeying in your heart. Hopefully you could see where this verse has led me and why I felt inspired by it. So here are a few things that I wanted to share with you. I got 2 points for you this morning that I wanted to share that I feel like we need to take from these verses, from this particular verse for today, for our lives today. And the first principle is this. Walking with God is never just wandering. Now I say that because it's common to speak of this moment in Israel's history as wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. Have you ever heard anybody say that? Israel was wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. And this word wandering in English creates an impression of this aimlessness. I'm wandering, right? I'm just going from one place to the other because I don't know where I'm going. Now that's what it sounds like. Sounds like I'm just passing time for the current generation to die walking in circles. That's what it sounds like. Now, if Hashem causes you to walk on a particular path, if He takes you on a walk, literally, and sometimes Hashem does that to us, He takes us on these walks, you know that that's for a reason, and you know that that's for a purpose. You're not wandering. Walking with God is never just aimless wandering. So for those of you who feel that you're not moving anywhere really, really fast, for those of you who feel that, where did this day go? As long as you are with Hashem, and those of you who feel that you're just busy and have nothing to show for it, you don't have to despair. Because if Hashem is leading you on this path, that you are not just wandering. There's a purpose behind it, even if you yourself do not see it. Just know that this path you're walking with Hashem, acknowledge Him at every turn, be mindful of His leadership, and the purposes of that path will be revealed to you in due time. My second principle that I wanted you to see from these verses is that hardships test your heart. If you ever had a heart test, then you know that's exactly what they do to you. They put you in some hardship to test how everything is working. According to this verse that we just read, God really wants to know what is in our hearts. So He tests us. That's what He does. He expects obedience to His commandments, but instead of just observing mere compliance, He wants to see how we respond under pressure. That's what this heart test is all about. It's not just about doing right or doing wrong. I know a lot of times when people think about commandments, they think about doing right, doing wrong. That's not the heart of it. And the pun is intended. A holy way of life, obedience, can actually be caused by many factors. But what's in your heart is what matters the most. What is the reason why are you doing this? Do we love God's commandments because we love God? Is that the question? Or is the love of the Lord, your God, in your heart, that commandment that we're given applies only to the scenarios when things go right? Well, no. Of course, that commandment, love the Lord with all your heart, applies even in the times of difficulty and stress and trouble. So do we abandon the things we believe in when the cost of obedience will cause us discomfort and suffering? That's the question. That's what the heart stress test is, essentially. Do we stop doing what we say is important? The things that we believe are important. The things are of God. Do we just put them aside because things get difficult? That's the test. Tests like this allows us to see a lot of times our own character. As we can course correct, we can do that even if we fail. That helps us to understand where we are. That is loving God purposefully. That is choosing to love. Now, Yeshua taught us, with men, things are impossible, but with God, all things are possible. So I say, let's walk with Him and learn to walk like He did, loving God with all our heart.